What's going on? I'm going to be doing a full review on the RG351M, the premium full metal handheld emulator. After using it for about 2 months, is it worth it? Let's find out. This is the RG351M, and it's a metal handheld game console emulator from Anbernic. It is a more premium version of their RG351 lineup, as the other ones are plastic. This system emulates NES to Dreamcast, and we'll get more into that in a bit. It has a mostly metal body that gives it a premium feel to the build. On the back, it has these rubber grips that have a really good grip and make it so that it stays in place when you set it down. The front has a 3x2 3.5-inch IPS screen. The D-pad, A, B, X, Y face buttons, start, select, and the dual analog sticks in the style of Switch Joy-Cons. The top of the system has L1, L2, R1, R2 buttons, 2 USB-C ports, one for charging and the other one is used as an OTG port, and the 3.5mm headphone jack. On the left side is the power button. The right side has the volume wheel, and the sides are the only part of the body that are made of plastic, which is most likely to get a better signal for the Wi-Fi chip. And lastly, the bottom has the speakers, the reset button, and an SD card slot. That's the basic overview of the console. Now onto the specs. The screen is a 3.5-inch 3x2 IPS display with a resolution of 320 by 480. The CPU in it is using the RG351M at 1.5 GHz and the Mali G31 MP2 for the graphics. It has 1 GB of RAM and can support up to a 256 GB SD card, though personally I've only tried the 128 GB one. Another addition to this version of the RG351 is the inclusion of a built-in Wi-Fi chip, and it has a 3500 mAh battery. Now onto the operating system that I chose to use. I'm using ArkOS. I recommend not using the default OS as it's not the best and some of the emulators don't work as well. And in the case of DS, the emulator menu doesn't work either. Using a different operating system should solve a lot of these problems. There are a few to choose from, but I chose ArkOS mainly because it fixes the menu problem on the DS emulator, and it has an easier way to get modded Doom games onto it than most of the others. It can also update using Wi-Fi unlike some of the other ones, so the only time I have to take out my SD card is when I want to add ROMs. I have seen that there are other really good operating systems out there, but I don't regret going with ArkOS at all. Next, for the build quality, it feels great in the hands and the metal body is really well machined. It looks great, and as for the buttons, the face buttons are really good and feel like they're made from a big company. The face buttons feel like a combination between the Switch Pro controller and the Xbox One buttons. If you've ever used a PowerA Pro controller, they feel almost the same as that. For the D-pad, it also feels great. It has a nice spike in the middle to stop you from pressing all of the directions at once, and it feels like the Pro Controller's D-pad, but with a better spike and a bit less mushiness. For the analog sticks, they feel just like the Joy-Con sticks, which I find to be a pretty good thing. They have L3 and R3 functionality and are very responsive. The L and R buttons are where there's some slight problems. First, they use micro switches that feel okay, but they're pretty loud. And unfortunately, my R1 gets stuck if it gets pushed back even slightly, so it's constantly getting stuck. I did manage to fix this though by taking the back of the system off and removing the R1 button and adding a little bit of electrical tape to the back of it, and then putting it all back together. The next little issue I found was my screen had a little bit of light leak on the left side. In most situations, it's not even noticeable as it's only visible on a very dark screen. And after using it for a couple weeks, it pretty much went away and it isn't an issue anymore. Overall, the build quality is very good, and the only real thing that was wrong with it was the R1 button. And had I noticed it sooner, I probably would have asked for a replacement unit, as that definitely seems like a defect, and I'm sure I could have gotten it replaced. Now for the most important part, the games it can play. The RG351 can emulate NES through PS1 with no problems. N64, PSP, and Dreamcast are where you start to see it struggle a little bit. The first game up here is Excitebike on the NES, and it has no problems running NES games at all. Next up is Donkey Kong Country on the SNES, and Super Nintendo games run great on here too. Here is Comic Zone on the Sega Genesis running perfect. This is Avatar: The Burning Earth on the GBA, and as you can see, the Game Boy Advance takes full advantage of this screen, and it looks amazing on here. There aren't any problems running it perfectly smooth either. For PS1, I chose Dead or Alive because in my experience with other emulators, this is one of the hardest games to run. And during gameplay, it seems to be at full speed the whole time, so it shouldn't have any trouble running any other PS1 games. So for N64, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some games run fine like Star Fox, Mario Kart, Mario 64, and others, but I'm not sure if it's my ROMs or the emulator, but a few of my games I've tried have a lot of weird glitches and slowdown. Like in Kirby, the enemies weren't appearing, it was just their shadows, and it made it completely unplayable. For Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, it had a ton of slowdown that made it unplayable, but Mario Kart ran just fine and was totally playable. If you want to check out some more performance, I have a full video dedicated to N64 testing. Now for PSP, I tested Warriors Orochi 2, and it ran decently. There was some slowdown here and there, but it seemed very playable to me. I also have a video on more PSP performance if you want to check that out too, but most games will be pretty playable with some slowdown for the more demanding ones. This is DS with Diddy Kong Racing, and it seemed to run well. The controls were responsive, and I couldn't hear or see any slowdown in this one, but there is no FPS counter in this emulator, so I'm not positive. Not every DS game will run this well though. A lot are playable, and if you want to see more testing, I have a video on DS also. Dreamcast is where things aren't very playable. This is Crazy Taxi, and in some spots of the game, it runs pretty well. But overall, there's just too much slowdown for it to be enjoyable. And from my experience, that was most Dreamcast games. Though I am sure that there's some that are playable, but a lot aren't. The last game I'm testing in this video is a Doom mod that puts the assets from Doom 2016 into the original type of game. And this one's really fun and is a cool combination of old and new Doom that feels really fresh. And it runs great on the RG351. There are plenty of other ports for the RG351 like Super Mario 64 and Half-Life, so there are definitely a lot of things to play on here. So now for my overall opinion. For the pros, it has a great screen for GBA. The performance up to PS1 is just about perfect. The face buttons and D-pad are great. The metal shell gives it a very premium feel. It has a pocketable size with the recessed sticks. The dual analog sticks with L3 and R3. For the cons, I think no HDMI out is a pretty big hit from the last generation. The screen isn't great for 4x3 games, and it makes them just a lot smaller. The shoulder buttons on mine were sticky, but hopefully that isn't a widespread problem, though I'm not sure. The RG351M is a great feeling device that maybe isn't worth the price for most. The metal body feels awesome and I personally love it, but it costs $140 compared to the $90 price point of the plastic model. So I think most people will be content with the plastic shell, and the only extra it provides besides the metal body is a built-in Wi-Fi unit. So while it's great, I think most people should go for the plastic model unless you want the best feeling device and don't mind paying for it. That was my review on the RG351M. Let me know what you thought of the device, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Or you can come stop by my Twitch stream to talk. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more tech and gaming content. Thanks for watching. Alpha phase? Yeah, pretty much. Isn't everything Nintendo Online still in alpha? Oh no, I think I'm dead. Oh, I lived from that. And we're just gonna throw out some smash attacks, see how it works. Oh! First one! What the hell? This character.